Welcome to World Affairs Today, brought to you by the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C., a leading forum for global education and international affairs.
Thank you all for being here today. This is a great forum. I'm certainly delighted to be here. The World Affairs Council is really without peer in educating the public about the issues that are so critical to our world and our times. The service it performs in this capacity is truly invaluable. And the Distinguished Speaker Series is one such service that we're all going to enjoy the benefit of today. Today, the distinguished speaker we're honored to have with us is a person who has given her entire adult life to public service, and I think serves as a model for what makes our country so great. From her early days in California and San Francisco politics to her current role as chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Senator Feinstein's work on behalf of her nation and her state has personified selflessness and bipartisan leadership. Now, I've been fortunate. I've had the opportunity over the years to interact with Senator Feinstein on numerous matters of importance to national security. Her knowledge of the security landscape, combined with her absolute integrity in addressing the facts, has very appropriately earned her the reputation as one of our nation's visionaries on these critical issues of our time. I always feel fortunate to be able to hear Senator Feinstein speak, and I'm looking forward to her talk today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the Honorable Dianne Feinstein, and Edie Fraser. Edie is here to present the award.
Thank you, Wes Bush. And to those of us that care so much about public service, as Wes said, there is no finer public servant in this nation or the world than Senator Dianne Feinstein. And as Wes said, every time we listen to the senator, we learn as she covers the world, as she covers the threats to this nation and the issues that we care about. Just to mention, she has sponsored 109 bills and co-sponsored over 206 in her amazing career. And we'll just throw in that she was one of the most respected mayors and voted the #1 respected mayor when she was mayor in San Francisco. On behalf of the board of the World Affairs Council, it is our privilege to give this plaque that says to Honorable Senator Dianne Feinstein, Chairman of the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the Outstanding International Public Service Award for your amazing leadership for this nation and the world. Senator Feinstein.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bess.
Put you in the middle and get a picture.
Okay, here we go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Press Club, and all of you who care about this great country and its position in the world, I'm very pleased to be here. But there's really only one reason I'm here. If Edie were a cowboy, she would be a champion roper. Because I do not do lunch speeches. I do not do lunch engagements. And she called and said, would I? And I said, oh, Edie, you know, I don't know about the day. I don't know about votes. I hate to sign up for something. Oh, please, please, please. And you know how she is. So here I am. And if you would give Edie a big round of applause, because she's a very unusual and special woman. And as for Wes Bush, When I first ran for the United States Senate, Northrop Grumman was really one of the only defense plants that would let me come and see what was being done. At the time, Kent Kressa was the CEO. And I thought, here I am, a Senate candidate, and they won't let me sit down and see what's happening in these plants. Northrop was not like that. And from this day forward, I came to have a great appreciation for the openness, for the kind of leadership. And Kent Kressa was wonderful, and he left big shoes, which Wes Bush has fit into just amazingly. So the only mistake he made was to remove the corporate headquarters from California and place them in Washington, D.C. So that's the only bone I have to pick with him. I need to ask you to give me a little bit of space here. I have a very bad cold, so you're going to be hearing some coughing and nose blowing, but please put up with it. I apologize for it. I'm on antibiotics and prednisone, so hopefully that's going to take care of it. But obviously I had to show up, so here I am. Okay, I have been chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence for some 11 years. I have been very graced by having a wonderful staff director who is here today, who came over from the House, became my liaison on intelligence, and then when I became chairman 3.5 years ago, made him staff director, and I'd like to introduce him to you. Would David Granis please stand? Right over there. We resolved that one of the first orders of business was to take a committee that had been partisan and change that into a totally bipartisan effort. And I'm very pleased that we have been able to do that. The vice chairman is Senator Saxby Chambliss from the great state of Georgia. He and I work closely together. I trust him. I believe he trusts me. I try to keep people as fully informed as we possibly can. And we have extended our oversight. We work staff to staff on a bipartisan basis, the oversight of all kinds of different activities of the 16 big intelligence agencies of our government. We are in the process of completing what will be a major study on the interrogation and detention of high-value detainees, their treatment, their custody, really all about it. Unfortunately, some time ago, the Republican aspect pulled out, so this is in effect a majority report, but it'll be 4,000 pages long. The staffs have gone through some 5 million pages of cables, emails, information, 20,000 footnotes. And so we hope to have that finished soon, and it'll go to the committee for its recommendation, and we will see what remains classified and what is released to the general public at that time. So in our oversight of many different areas, staff has been branching out, and particularly as we go into certain operations, we have been very careful. We have a special effort on the CIA Predator program. The staff has made 28 visits to various facilities, attended intelligence gathering. We have looked at the intelligence. The key to these, to minimize collateral damage, to go for the targeted individuals, but to have intelligence which is just as good as it could be to be totally actionable. And so the collateral damage is really greatly reduced beyond what you may read in the press. I have asked, please, 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 can I release these numbers? And the answer is no, they're classified. So that's about as far as I could go on that. Most people asked me right away, are we more secure today than we were before 9/11? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is a resounding yes, we are. In the first place, the stovepipes, which really enabled agencies to keep intelligence to themselves, are down. So intelligence is rapidly analyzed by, I think, a much improved analytic core across the community, and red teamed, which means argued against to develop problems in that intelligence, and then sent on to wherever it should go. We now have a counterintelligence center to protect the homeland, to specialize on threats against the homeland. We have the FBI, which has developed a 10,000 plus intelligence unit within the United States. And some people are surprised at that, and they say, oh, well, Bob Mueller, the director of the FBI, in his public report in an open hearing to us, pointed out that there have been some 20 arrests this past year of people engaged in the pursuit of a terrorist plot against this country who have been stopped. I think that's very important. I think it's important that we continue it. It is my belief that people will come after us if we can, if they can. Therefore, the safety of this nation, the protection of this nation is really our first challenge and our main goal. So I think that is very good. I think to show the difference, you can look at the Abbottabad takedown. You can come to understand the rehearsal that went into it, the care that was taken with intelligence, the specialization of the people who participated, and the fact that it was done without an American life lost in the process. There's no question that it's created friction with Pakistan, but it's very difficult for most of us to believe that Osama bin Laden can live in a relatively large compound in a military-related community for over 5 years, and that community does not know that he's there. So this was a very important takedown because this was the head of the movement to kill Americans, 3,000 of them, on 9/11 in those great buildings in New York City. And it was carried out, and most interestingly enough, the head of that mission was, in fact, at the time, the director of the Counterintelligence Agency, now the head Secretary of Defense, a great Californian and a good friend, Leon Panetta. And that was a mission really very carefully and very well carried out. So I can say that the intelligence community is much better. We have achieved some element of overall coordination in the authorization of a director of national intelligence who was mentioned earlier in this program, and that is General James Clapper. And he has the overall authority of these 16 agencies. As you might guess, because of decades of separateness, there's some amount of territorial imperative, which I think over the years has begun to dim, that nonetheless has a way to go. The thrust of this is to be able to have, if you will, a kind of central command from which orders can flow and priorities be adjusted quickly. And I think we're on our way to that. We are in the process right now of doing an intelligence authorization bill. And that will be marked up in the Intelligence Committee tomorrow afternoon. Part of this bill will address what has become a particularly egregious situation, and that is leaks. And it's a very difficult area because people ask you a question, there can be a statement made totally inadvertently. Reporters, like the gentleman who's going to question me in a few minutes, have developed a unique skill of piecing things together so they get one little bit in one place, and then they go to 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 additional places, and they manage to put together a whole story. The problem with this is that it jeopardizes actionable intelligence. It jeopardizes people who are willing to help this country. And it creates a view, well, why should I help them? I'm not going to be protected, and my life may well be in danger. So that's the main part about leaking, that you really do jeopardize an effort that is beginning operation. We have a process in the Senate whereas the leadership, and I'm very proud to say that we work closely with the House Chair and Ranking Member. I had the privilege of going with Vice Chairman Chambliss and the House and Senate Chair and Vice Chair to Afghanistan a few weeks ago. And so we work closely together as well and share information, and that's bipartisan. I think that makes for a much more coherent, stronger civilian oversight. Let me just point out the need for civilian oversight of intelligence agencies. It is critical and it is key. It is as important as civilian oversight of our defense agencies, that intelligence is overseen, that intelligence is conducted within constitutional bounds, that legal opinions are able to be reviewed by us to see the grounds that certain actions were taken on. And this has become more and more difficult because presidents and administrations want to carefully guard their in-house papers and don't want to show them to the other branch of government. But without them, we cannot make judgments as to whether certain things were initiated with legal approval. And that's very, very important. The bill that we will be marking up tomorrow essentially adds an administrative process within the departments for the investigation of leaks. The Director of National Intelligence would ask the inspectors general to carry this out. We have some very good inspectors general. We may need to give them some additional authorities, which we can do, but up to this point they appear to be adequate to really, for those leaks that are likely not to have federal prosecution, because federal prosecution is very difficult to achieve, that there will be an administrative process that could go up to termination for someone that knowingly leaks classified information. It will also have a cooling off period of when you leave government with a classified status of 1 year before you can go on as a pundit on a station and talk about all you know about intelligence. So steps are being taken. Let me end with one other thing, and then we'll go into the next form. I happen to believe that the most dangerous part of the world today is the Middle East. I happen to believe that not enough attention is centered on it. I happen to believe that something that happened in the spring overturnings of government has really metastasized into a very unpredictable situation. And I'll leave you with one description. Egypt, which is the largest country in the Middle East, and to some extent, with its culture, its economy, a very, very prestigious country, also has agreed to a two-state solution, recognizes Israel's right to exist, and whatever one might say about Mubarak, he had been helpful to Israel in terms of keeping guns out of going into Gaza and being a supporter of a dialogue which might yield a two-state solution. And that is a major lift in that part of the country. We now have a parliament that is 50% Muslim Brotherhood, 25% Salafist, even more conservative, and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood is now the president of the country. I was told the other day that what he most wants is the release of the blind sheikh who was responsible for the bombing of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. I hope that's not correct, because it is a non-starter, I believe, with this country. And so how Egypt goes and what happens, I think in a way is going to set a trend. Its size, its complexity, the difficulty, the military part of it, the Islamist part of it, the secular part of it, how this all comes together, and whether a stable, somewhat progressive government can come out of this remains to be seen. And on top of that, we now have Syria. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in the Q&A, so I won't go into it anymore right here. But I just want to say to you that we need to beef up our intelligence in the shadowy world of terror, of asymmetric attack, of asymmetric armies, terrorist groups, not nation states. The biggest weapon we have is good, actionable intelligence. And so our job is to keep that strong and to be able to see we can protect our people, prevent an attack, and do the right thing for the world at large. So I'm delighted to be here, and we'll go on to the next part, and I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you again, all of you, for being here. Let's start where you left off, in Syria. A very uncertain situation. The Defense Department just today renewed the warning that some Salafist elements, Al-Qaeda and Iraq types, have showed up in the middle of the fighting. And there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Syrian opposition and also the intentions of President Assad. Whether he might, for example, use chemical weapons against his opponents, what he's doing moving chemical weapons, which he has begun to do. Do we have the kind of intelligence that not only takes pictures from the sky and shows us, yes, they've moved something, but gets at that human question of what is intent? What sort of government do the opposition types envision? What is Assad's intent? Is our intelligence good enough?
I think not at this time on those very difficult questions. I think that we know where the CW, the chemical weapons, are kept. There are a large number of sites. There is a large variety of chemical weapons. I think it's fair to say they are being watched carefully. Any movement hopefully will be detected. I think it would be absolutely dastardly for Assad to use chemical weapons against his own people. And I trust he's got the good sense to know that. With respect to developments, I think the Arab League statement that they would work with him to find a safe harbor for him is very significant. And hopefully we can support that, and a safe harbor can be found, and he can retreat. I think if he and his family leave governance, there is an opportunity to put something together. Now, John, as we were talking before we came in, the problem is this. There are literally dozens of groups, and some of them are rather shadowy. You don't really know Probably the biggest one is the National Council in Turkey, and it looks at this point that that's the group that we should try and work with. I jotted down on a piece of paper this morning, actually David did it for me in a staff meeting, of things that I think we should work to do. The first is the no-fly zone. More difficult to do, you can't do it as easily as we did it in Iraq, but I believe that can be worked out. Second is to support the National Council, see if we can help grow them into a consequential, diverse, representative group that has good thinkers and more light than heat. Support the Arab League, work for a safe exit of Assad. Keep out weapons, gasoline out of the country, blockade ships, keep ships with gasoline out. Both from Iran as well as from other places in the world. And the last one is carefully guarding the chemical weapons sites. I think the risk of civil war is enormous. And you look at this some days and you think, well, they're already in a civil war. And other days you think, no, not quite yet. But there is a very interesting article in this morning's Financial Times, ladies and gentlemen, written by a professor at AU by the name of Jensen, that speaks to the history of Syria, and particularly the minority groups, the Alawites, and what could happen in a civil war if the country split and an Alawite territory stretched up its coastline up to Turkey. And it's bad news. So keeping our eye on this country very closely, I think making a series of statements and backing them up where we can with action. And some of this has been taken, such as keeping weapons out of the country, weapons that would go to the government, encouraging the defection of high-level officials. This is now beginning to happen, just as it happened in Libya. And that may portend a trend line of how this thing is going to go. But those would be my suggestions.
Let's just stick with that for a minute, because it is a terribly important issue. On the issue of stopping arms supplies, one of the problems was flights over Iraq from Iran to Syria. Those stopped, but there are some indications that they have resumed using Syrian Air Force planes.
Well, candidly, let me express dismay at Prime Minister Maliki's support of Syria in this respect. The United States put a lot of American lives and treasure into Iraq. And to see if that government is not going to cooperate, that would be, I think, a very bad happening. And I would very much like to encourage the cooperation of the Iraq government in this regard, because it'll be bad for Iraq too if this thing turns into a massive civil war. And I think the American people do not want boots on the ground. Some people talk about it, but when it actually comes to putting Americans in what would become another war, I don't think it's the right thing to do. The other thing that I think is really important is encouraging both Russia and China to play a role. They are major global powers, and major global powers have a responsibility to the rest of the world to exert that power in a constructive way. And this is really an opportunity to do just that. I think their vetoing of UN resolutions, I think their reluctance to support the Arab League is a huge mistake, because it means these countries are really not going to help solve some of the big problems in the world. And I hope they will change and become a dominant force and so that the three great powers, the United States, Russia, China, can really work together to create a backdrop for some very positive action.
The other obvious danger, you mentioned the situation in Egypt, but we have a parallel situation potentially on the Golan Heights, on Israel's northern border. The departure of President Mubarak has led to some instability in the Sinai and some greater troubles in Gaza with things moving across that border. Do you think there's a similar danger on the northern border as Syria falls apart and Assad loses control? The family has, shall we say, had its issues, but one thing they did do for many, many years was to maintain the peace up on the Golan Heights overlooking northern Galilee. That could all fall apart, couldn't it?
Well, that's right. And one of the things that had existed was information that Israel and Syria might well be able to form an agreement to be able to handle the Golan Heights issue as well as a couple of other issues. And that indeed, if so, was going to be very good news. Israel is put in peril by all of this, and no one should think to the contrary. There are, it's estimated, 50,000 rockets, some of them more sophisticated than in the last shelling Israel got from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. But those rockets are a real concern. There are so many, and any release by Iran of Hezbollah to begin to fire on Israel would create more problems.
In any event, have you seen any indication that the Iranians really are prepared to negotiate away their right to develop nuclear weapons?
I think their coming to the table indicates a change. In October, Lady Ashton wrote a letter to Jalili suggesting this. I believe it was November or December when Jalili responded positively. And so these big power plus one meetings began. The first one, I think there was a lot of encouragement. And I think then there was discouragement. Right. But I think people have to think long term. Absent an agreement, what happens? Iran continues to enrich, goes up to or beyond the 20%, becomes a nuclear weapons power, gets attacked by Israel, and I believe Israel will not let this happen. And then what is the reaction? Iran is militarily, strategically deep. Iran will respond. How is unknown. And one of the things that I think we need to spend more time on is if they do this and we do that, what's the next step? And this could be cataclysmic for the entire Middle East. So it is, in my view, the most serious question on the world map. And in terms of security, the #1 issue right now. And we have to get it right. And we have to encourage China, Russia, help Iran stop, Syria gets solved, Egypt gets stabilized, Tunisia looks like it's moving along quite well, Libya gets stabilized. It's really critical, or any number of things could be a major eruption.
Let's talk about leaks, why don't we?
Oh.
You knew we were going to have to do this. One of my core questions is we've seen Secretary Panetta, Director Clapper institute some new procedures to restrict leaks. You've talked some about it. Your committee is working on some legislation that would restrict briefings to the press.
Oh, you picked up that part.
I
didn't
did.
mention that part.
No,
You
I
read
just
the
did.
bill?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
I did. Well, we can talk about that offline. I do have some questions about that. Well, all right, we'll open it up. During the Bush administration, when it was making a case for war against Iraq, the counter-arguments to what the administration was putting on the table about Iraqi connections to al-Qaeda and Iraqi WMD would not have been possible under some of these conditions that are now being set. And I wonder if that leaves the American people, when it's done responsibly, poorer, without access to people who say, look, I know what my director said publicly, I know what the White House said publicly, but actually our intelligence doesn't support that.
Well, let me answer it this way. One of the reasons why I wanted to become chairman of the Intelligence Committee is to see that never again does the intelligence community do a national intelligence estimate called an NIE that is both wrong and bad. Saddam Hussein did not possess weapons of mass destruction. We had our Secretary of State, a distinguished four-star general, stand before the world at the Security Council of the United Nations and hold up a vial that he claimed was a biological weapon from a mobile lab. There were none. That's a real blight on our intelligence, and it should never, ever happen again. I voted to go to war in Iraq. I read that classified report very carefully. I read the white paper. I believed it. Shame on me. And I voted yes to go to war on what was America's first preemptive war. And so I have a sympathy with your question, obviously, but the way to remedy the situation, I think, is to see that policymakers have the right intelligence instead of intelligence which is just plain wrong.
And yet there's always a diversity of opinion, even in the intelligence community. That's one of its strengths, is that intelligence research in the State Department does not always agree with the Defense Intelligence Agency or...
Which is exactly what happened. And the problem was, as I recall it, every time there was a big difference, the CIA prevailed. And with the Energy Department or with the military departments. And now the analysis has been changed, is much better. I'd like to believe that this would never happen again, but we've had a seminal instance where policymakers trust intelligence, and that intelligence could not be trusted. And that's a big problem for this country.
Now, the other part of this problem, I think, is that, thank you, what prevails really, in my experience, is the White House, not so much the CIA.
The White House owns intelligence.
And the White House has been known on occasion to leak. I said at a conference 20 years ago, at least, in whatever administration that was, that the ship of state was the only one that I had ever encountered that tended to leak from the upper decks. Still not a bad line, I guess.
I guess.
So Director Clapper can do what he's doing, Congress can act, but the president, as you just said, has control of all intelligence. And some of the leaks we've seen recently that have created such a stir do have, I think, some fingerprints on them that are not from the Central Intelligence Agency, ODNI, or the Defense Department. And so how do you discipline that?
I am aware of that. I think that's a correct analysis. I think the White House has to understand that some of this is coming from its ranks. I don't know specifically where, but I think they have to begin to understand that and do something about it. And I mean, there's one book they can read and they'll see it very clearly. And I think that should be the case. I think, you know, what the president actually knows about this is difficult because with respect to intelligence, he is in a bubble. He has his daily brief called the PDB, the President's Daily Brief, early every morning. And so he gets a briefing of intelligence. I don't believe for a moment he goes out and talks about it. I don't believe the briefers go out and talk about it. But who knows who else? And I think that the importance of this has to be really set by the president himself. And hopefully he will do it. And I think he'll most likely read the book and see it himself.
Have you had a chance to talk to him about this?
No.
Because you cannot, if I'm right, compel testimony from members of his staff.
That's correct.
Nor is there any legal recourse because, as you say, the president ultimately has control of all classified information. And so if members of his staff are declassifying it, it's generally not a legal issue.
Well, that's right. And the president can declassify it like that. And one of the things we do in our bill is ask for simultaneous notice that we will know if an issue is declassified and we will know why. And see, right now we don't know. And so that has its difficulties.
Let me go to the audience questions now. Do you believe that good actionable intelligence and intelligence transparency are completely at odds?
Yes, to a great extent, I do. Intelligence transparency, as I would take its meaning, means to make it public. You can't do that. You just can't and have good actionable intelligence. One of the things that we've learned in this asymmetric battle that we've been fighting is that the opposition is not stupid and that the internet has changed the nature of communication. So it's very easy to communicate. And so you have to be careful. I mean, that was the WikiLeaks, Assange, the problem with all of these things going out, you know, millions of bits of intelligence, which did have a downside for the United States. There's no question about it. So by the nature of what intelligence is, it's to give you information which can enable you to make a correct decision, whatever that decision may be. So it's information for policymakers. To make that all public immediately jeopardizes people that have given you that information. It jeopardizes your ability to properly respond to it. And it kills, I think, any effort to really solve that. These are difficult problems. These aren't the average problems that you get intelligence on. These are special problems.
Now, you've raised another really good issue that I know you have paid a lot of attention to, and that's cybersecurity. And what more we need to do in that area. We are facing an enormous challenge from China, smaller but somewhat more sophisticated operation out of Russia, and even some of our allies who are active in this role. So what sorts of things do you think need to be done to increase the security of our communications, especially as we move more and more to the cloud?
Cyber is the #1 national security problem facing us. And I think people don't really understand the degree to which these intrusions are made. Because a lot of them are classified and can't be released. And in the private sector, banks, for example, that are robbed, like the Royal Bank of Scotland, of $10 million. I can't remember if it was 10 or 8 million. It was in 2008 from 250 ATMs. They didn't want their clients to know that. Citibank, 10 million. They didn't want their clients to know that. So cyber attacks on company after company by the thousands that people don't know about, where it becomes extraordinarily difficult is where you get to critical infrastructure. The command and control systems, which were taken down in Eastern Europe during that conflagration. A command and control system in the Taiwan Strait that could be taken down. Our command and control systems, the FAA, the electric grid, all of these things that would throw a country into a real turmoil can take place. The big offenders are China, Russia, and to some extent Israel. Let me just put the card on the table. So it's really very important that we have, I think, some kind of international agreement on cyber. I even doubt that the Chinese central government knows the depth to which there are cyber penetrations into this country coming out of certain parts of China. Thousands and thousands a day of cyber intrusions. So the part of the bill that the Intelligence Committee staff have done and that we have worked on together, and is a part of Lieberman, Collins, Rockefeller, Feinstein, Carper now, is the information sharing part of that bill. And we've worked very hard. We have shared it with others. I just told Wes, you know, please take a look at this final draft quickly. This is fully transparent. We've tried to work with people in the liberal wing who have concerns about privacy to see that privacy can be taken care of. We've tried to do it on a basis that high tech has an understanding, defense has an understanding. It's not easy, but when this information is shared under the bill, you're absolved from liability. And so that's shared with the government. So I think that's the positive nature of this bill. Companies don't want to share data, but in this arena, if we, you know, don't stand together, we will all hang separately. I really believe that.
Another interesting point you just raised is the bipartisanship of your committee and Chairman Rogers and Ranking Minority Member Ruppersberger's House Intelligence Committee, which is in rather sharp contrast to the atmosphere on the Hill these days on issues as important as the federal budget. How is it that those two committees seem to be the exception to what increasingly is the rule of partisanship?
I think one of the things, and this could be wrong, but I think one of the things that we broke down from the very beginning, and David was a huge help with this, is to bring the two staffs together. They worked separately. There was Democratic staff and Republican staff. And who the staff director and his or her ability to do this is really critical. I think this goes to the top, and I think that the intentions of the leaders of the committee is critical. I think briefing individual members when you learn something, cutting them in. I mean, there are, Saxby Chambliss and I may have some disagreements. I can't think of any at the moment. And either we'll compromise them, or I will give, or he will give, because the overall mission is too important that we get our work done. It had been 6 years before with no intelligence authorization bill, which is supposed to be done annually. Those are the laws under which the intelligence community works and any change in those laws. And we have now passed 3. So that's a good sign. And we've done it by unanimous consent, by working together, by using the mechanism of pre-conferencing a bill where our two staffs, House, Senate, get together and work from the beginning, by having openness and sharing between the two houses. I find it very easy to talk to Mike Rogers, to Dave Ruppersberger, to Saxby Chambliss, and that's really quite wonderful.
Yeah, but again, it's the exception. And here we are in a country where millions of Americans are suffering economically. Your home state has been hit hard since 2008. We've got West Bush's company trying to deal blindly with sequestration, with no movement on that issue. So why is it that the rest of the Congress can't do what you and Senator Chambliss and Congressman Rogers have been able to do?
See, for a while I thought, well, it's the nature of what we do. And then I became chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, and Lamar Alexander of Tennessee is the Republican ranking member. And we are able to work very closely together. And you have to talk. And I think you have to understand how this government is set up. Because if you compromise in an ideologic straitjacket, becomes a dirty word. Compromise in our democracy becomes the word that affects change, because it's the only thing you can do to affect change. If people resist on both sides and won't compromise so that they can pound their chests and say, I helped shut down the government, or, you know, I don't care what happens, I'm going to cut everything, it's of no help. It's of no help, because there are problems that you have to handle. And the only way you can handle them is to try and compromise. So the ideologic straitjacket doesn't really work for a working body. And I'm lucky I've got two people who understand that I work with, and I think that's the positive of it, John. And I just think we have to understand that we don't do the country a service to elect people who won't make something work, who won't ever come to a conclusion. If it's not their way, it's the highway. And that is just plain wrong. Yeah. You can't do it in this kind of democracy. Remember, we're not a parliamentary system.
Well, there's some people now who wish we were.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're now looking at a presidential election that is starting at least down that same path, with attacks and counterattacks and ads that don't always stand up to scrutiny, as a kind of zero-sum game, if you will. And I think a lot of Americans wonder what has happened to us. Why is this going on?
Well, what it does is it divides and it polarizes the people. And it takes a kind of, puts campaigns on a very low level. And the one thing this democracy, and you know, I've been on the Judiciary Committee now for the 20 years I've been here, so I've been up close and personal to the Constitution and really come to have a great appreciation for this document. It is the foundation of all law. And the government that comes out of it with the three equal branches is really amazing. Well, civics isn't taught very much in school. So people don't really understand that what our government depends on is an enlightened electorate. People have to become willing to grapple with the issues in a thoughtful way, not based on bumper strips or house signs, but really think about these issues. Join groups, you know. I was a member for a long time of the World Affairs Council, of the League of Women Voters, of decisions, great decisions in my early days, where I could really, post-college, meet with people, meet with professors, meet with others, to learn more and more and more. And one of the great things about being a senator is that you have access to all of the great minds in the world. You can pick up the phone and call someone, whether it be a Mark Zandi, or I'm going to call this Professor Jensen and say, would you come down and sit down with some of us and just tell us a little bit about your thoughts? I mean, that's an amazing thing to enrich somebody's decision-making ability. And we need more of it, not less of it.
We have time for one last question, and I will, in this case, defer to one of our foreign visitors. Thank you for coming. On the visa waiver issue, opportunities and risks from an intelligence and security point of view.
Oh, I know who that is.
Let the record show that I did not identify the questioner.
Begins with a P, I think. In any event, I historically have not been a big fan of the visa waiver program for everybody. It's a huge program. It admits, well, at least 23 million Americans a year through a whole number of countries that don't have to have visas. The visa is waived. The problem for us is we have no exit system. We don't know if those people return home. It's shocking, but it's true. And I've been working with the department to try to see that they come up with an exit system. And we keep, for years, we've been promised dates, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen. You know, you go to China, you fill out a little slip. It's in triplicate. It says your purpose, it says where you're staying, and when you're going home. There's none of this for us. We don't know where anybody that comes into the country is or whether they go home. And so we don't even know, when you talk about illegal immigration, how much of it is from visa waivers where people come here and just stay. We don't know how much of it is from visas where people don't leave. And that's been a long-standing problem that I have wanted to fix. And I think it's fair to say I'm a member of the Immigration Subcommittee of Judiciary. I'm actually number 2 in seniority. And I've been pushing and pushing and pushing. The way it's measured is with, I guess it's called a rejection rate, and that's measured on when they know people do not come home. And then certain countries are not admitted until that rate drops below, I forget the percent right now, but it's a low percent. There are countries that have been very helpful to the United States, that are good friends to the United States, that are very concerned about it, and I am aware of it, and I am hopeful that we will have an exit system soon, and that should go a long way to handle the problem.
Thank you very much. You have certainly lived up to your well-earned reputation for
thank
candor
you.
and insight.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for World Affairs Today, a production of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Stay connected with us at www.worldaffairstoday.org.